Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Chaucer's Books virtual author discussion for tonight's mystery panel. I'm going to push on record here. My name is Michael Takeuchi. I'm the events coordinator at Chaucer's Books, a 47-year-old independent bookstore located in Santa Barbara, California. To purchase tonight's book, browse other titles, or check out our upcoming events, please go to our website, chaucersbooks.com. Upcoming events include an in-store book launch with young adult novelist Elizabeth Foscue on Tuesday when she talks about her new novel, Pest, Tuesday, April 5th. And then April 6th, we'll have a virtual discussion with Natalie Hodges, the author of Uncommon Measure. She'll speak with her former teacher, someone you might have heard of, Michael Pollan. Of course, he wrote How to Change Your Mind, The Omnivore's Dilemma, and This Is Your Mind on Plants. Tonight, while our guests and I are the only ones seen and heard on this webinar, please feel free to utilize the Q&A function located at the bottom of your screen. YouTubers, please type in questions via the chat. We hope to get to all of them before the night's through. Tonight's event is being simulcasted on and recorded for our YouTube channel and will be available to view after program's completion. So let's begin. Tonight, you're in for a treat with Get a Clue, a behind-the-scenes look at mystery writing. We have four talented authors that are going to join us, and allow me to introduce them. First, we'll start with our own Santa Barbaran, Lita Sedaris. Come on out, Lita. Hi.
Thank you so much, Michael. I'm so happy to be here.
We're happy to have you. And of course, Lita is an attorney and author of several books, including Slightly Murderous Intent and her recent release, Gambling with Murder, which is behind me right now. She's the winner of the Helen McCloy Mystery Writers of America Scholarship and a Killer Nashville Silver Falchion Award finalist. And then joining her, we welcome up from Northern California, James Latwell. Hello, James. Goodbye, James. Hi.
Hi, Michael.
James uses 29 years behind bars as an influence in his novels, short stories, and screenplays. He's a former associate warden in a maximum security prison, a hostage negotiator, facility captain, and a director of California State's parole system. He has been nominated for the Silver Falchion for Best Procedural Mystery and the Bill Kreider Award for Short Fiction. His published novels include Black Label, At What Cost, Bury the Past, and Little River. So welcome, and I'm glad you're not behind the bars anymore, James.
Me too, Michael. Thank you.
And also joining us from Virginia, of all places. Thank you for joining us. I know it's a little later. Welcome, Heather Widener.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much.
Heather got her start early as a cop's kid. She was a technical writer and editor, college professor, software tester, and IT manager. She writes the Delaney Fitzgerald mystery stories, the Jules Keene glamping mysteries, and the Mermaid Bay Christmas Shop mysteries, which is coming up in 2023. Is that correct?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
And her short stories appear in the Virginia's for Mystery series, 50 Shades of Cabernet, which sounds like it's going to be one of my favorites, Deadly Southern Charm, and Murder by the Glass. And her novellas appear in the Mutt Mystery series. Dogs and Wine, you can't get much better than that. And finally, we want to introduce our moderator, Nancy Cole Silverman.
And unmute me.
There you go. Hi, Nancy.
Hi.
After 25 years in news talk radio, the now retired Nancy Cole Silverman is now into her second career, fiction writing. She is the author of the Carol Childs Mystery series and the Misty Dawn series. But later this year, she's going to launch a new series called The Navigator's Daughter. So please welcome our moderator, Nancy Cole Silverman.
Thank you, Michael. I really appreciate that. And I'm happy to be here tonight. And first off, I really want to thank Lita, who set this up with us at Chaucer's, which is a wonderful bookstore in Santa Barbara. And if you get to Santa Barbara, which is heaven's place on earth here, go over to Chaucer's and you will have reached the zenith of it all. And so, Michael, thank you. And I'm just going to say I've had a fantastic week, because when Lita asked me if I'd moderate this panel, I was very glad to do it, because I got a chance to read from these 3 different authors. And I'm very pleased to be here today to moderate the Get a Clue, a discussion about how authors develop their characters and their clues, which can be quite complex when you want to put something on the page without revealing too much. So I'm happy to say that I have spent a delightful week reading these books, and I've gone from inside a senior citizens retirement center in Santa Barbara with Lita to a cozy vacation trailer rental park in Florida with Heather, and to the very chilling side of San Francisco with a mystery written about the dark side of the pharmaceutical world with James Latoll. So reviewers have described Lita's book as her newest book, which is the 5th in her series, Gambling with Murder, as laugh out loud fun. And I got to tell you, I did this. And thank you, Lita, for reading it. I love the cover. It's absolutely fabulous. And I held it up in bed and was laughing out loud. My husband said, "What are you laughing at?" I said, you can't believe you got to read the book. And then I went to Heather's Vintage Trailers and Blackmailers, which is the first in a new series. And I got to tell you, I think this is going to be a big success for you, Heather. I loved this new series, and your reviewers have referred to it as the quintessential cozy, and it is. It's heartwarming. And James, oh my gosh, Black Label. I didn't want to turn the lights off. This is a psychological thriller. It's going to have readers on the edge of their seat. And every woman who's ever gone out at night alone, the biggest fear is you might wake up and not know where you are. And that's what happens on page 1. And it's gotcha from there. So I'm just real excited to have these 3 other authors with me today. I'm going to say that all of these books kept me away from watching the news, which, we kind of need to do, take a little break. And those of you who know me know my background is working in news and talk radio. So I was very happy to have that. It gave me, despite the thrills and the chuckles, gave me a little late night relief. So as an author myself, who swung from traditional cozy to traditional mysteries, I'm very happy to be here today. But I'm going to start with a little introduction because we're going to kind of toggle between what readers see on the page and what writers see on the page. Because as writers, we see things and read things a little differently. So I thought it would be fun today to kind of share those secrets with our readers out there and our writers out there who might be kind of going like, how did they do that? So I'm going to start with Lita, and I'm going to ask you a little bit about what inspired you? Now, this is the 5th in your series, and I found this a very interesting kind of new, because you've introduced a new character here. So tell me a little bit, what inspired you about gambling here, that Gambling with Murder? What gave you the title, and what inspired you?
Well, actually, it wasn't gambling that inspired me. It was senior citizens, because the past few years I spent a lot of time with my own parents, my husband's parents, and even a good friend that I had that lived in a posh retirement community in Santa Barbara. So I saw a lot of the inner workings. I hung around with a lot of these people, and I saw everything from some of them living at home with caregivers to living in assisted living facilities to, like I said, a posh retirement community. And so, it seemed like a natural progression to write about them, because
somewhere a spark went off.
Exactly. Exactly.
And what? Okay, so a spark went off in a murder in a retirement center. Was that? Did you see
attempted murder? Nancy.
Attempted murder. That kind of got you.
Well, because you see these senior citizens, and I knew them. They were aged 80 to 101, and they looked diminished, but they had so much going on and so much that they wanted to do. And they didn't want anything to hold them back. So I gave them that opportunity to do whatever they pleased in Gambling with Murder.
And I think you did a great job. And I'm going to hold you there because we're going to come back to that. And Heather and Lita, your character is a woman about 35, I think, is that right?
My character's 26.
26. Okay, she's a little. But Heather, your character in Vintage Trailers and Blackmails, talk to me a little bit about what inspired you to for this book. What was the inspiration? Because this is a new series for you, where Lita is kind of going from for number 4 to number 5, and now you've got a brand new series. And I loved it because you took us into a very unusual setting. You want to talk about that?
I needed her. She's an amateur sleuth. She's not really a sleuth at all. She's a campground owner in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. And I needed a job where she could sleuth and poke around, and it needed to be a town. And I thought, what can I do? My husband loves vintage cars and trailers and boats, and
so that's
you
what
name it.
inspired you? I mean,
Well, he rebuilds things, and he's always bringing home these boats and campers and cars and all this stuff. But we watched this channel, and the couple, they were actually in Napa Valley. They were rebuilding old Airstreams, and they were turning them into these glamorous things and reselling them. I thought, how perfect. They're recycling, they're upcycling, and it's glamping, because I am not a go out in the woods and hide your food in the trees. No. It's got to have a door. It's got to have electricity. So glamping was perfect. Glamorous camping.
You know, I like that. I found that you did a very good job with that. I thought, I want to go there. I really thought I want the Airstream. And I thought that would be really fun. Okay. And James, oh my gosh, what inspired you to write this very psychological thriller?
Yeah, it's a little bit more on the dark side than Heather or Lita's books. I have to admit that. But a couple of things I think came together at the same time. We had, a family member who was in the hospital doing some treatments and that kind of thing, and we happened to notice that one of the IV bags hanging down didn't have their name on it. It was somebody else's. Oh. And so it kind of, that kind of stuck around for a while. So, do you really know what's in that pharmaceutical that's hanging into your loved one's arm? But at the real impetus of the book came at another independent bookstore. It was at Book Passage. There's a mystery writers conference there. And I was on faculty, and we were sitting around talking about character motivation. And one of the big themes that this particular group had was fear. And so I went back after that session at night and just started sketching out some story ideas. And that's how Jillian Cooper kind of came to life. Was, everything that she's faced with is very upfront, very fear-based. Mm-hmm. And she has to react to that.
We're going to get into characters, but I'm a little bit more interested right now in knowing what your inspiration was. And you kind of touched on that because your background is very interesting, and you spent a lot of time in identifying the criminal mind and working as a negotiator and so forth. So was there an incident that kind of influenced you and helped round this out a little bit?
There was an incident that, and the book talks about it a little bit, where the Mexican mafia years ago was actually able to get state government contracts. They had fronts applying for state funds and received contracts to launder their drug money. And it went on for a number of years before anybody at the state level found it. So that kind of folds into the book a little bit, where the Mexican mafia is a little bit of a financial backer of a pharmaceutical operation that is kind of the underpinnings of Black Label.
Yeah, I like the way you brought things in from the real world and you folded it in, not too quickly, because it's like when we first meet somebody, we kind of take them at face value. And then as you open the book and you go further and further, more and more explodes in your book onto the page. So you chose to do this. This is a freestanding book. You have a very successful series. You left the series and did this because there must have been a very pressing need to drive this book, was there?
Yeah, that's the book that was at least telling me that the story had to come out now. The previous books have been more or less the police procedural type of set, standard format. This is different. You're right. It's a psychological thriller, and I wanted to do something a little different, and this kind of plays into that. It was very fun to do, but I'm going back to police procedural later this year. But I'll visit the psychological thriller again. It was a lot of fun to write.
Well, I enjoyed it. And it's interesting that all three of these authors have chosen female protagonists. And I want to talk a little bit about the female protagonists. They're all about the same age, all at different experiences in their life, different goals and so forth, different parts of the country. So Lita, tell me a little bit about your protagonist in your book. Let's talk about Claire Locke. Claire Locke, to me, is just, I'd like to know her. I respect her. She's an attorney. She can't help but want to know behind the scenes what's really going on. I like this woman.
Well, thank you. Well, Corey Locke is loosely based on my former career working in a movie studio. She is a 26-year-old entertainment lawyer who works for a movie studio, but her day job takes a back seat to what she enjoys doing most, which is investigating missing persons and homicides.
Just a little dabble.
Yeah. In one case, actually, in my second book, Murder Gone Missing, she investigated a missing homicide. So it helps matters that her father was a well-known Los Angeles private investigator, and he's the one who really showed her the ropes and provided her with this collection of weaponry, legal and illegal, which it comes in very handy in my series because she does need to at least wield them. Maybe she doesn't use them. But and as the series progresses, you'll see that she's doing PI work on her own and without any supervision, which gets her into trouble.
However, you mentioned that her father had been a PI, so she's a little going after that, but naturally.
Well, she tried not to. She tried to do be a lawyer, but it was so boring compared to what she knew, and she couldn't help it because she's so good at it.
I think that's why I like Lita, is that she just can't help it. She just can't help herself.
But day jobs can be so boring, Nancy.
Oh yeah.
When you've got skills.
And we're going to come back because Clara has some very interesting relationships with her sidekicks. Yeah. And I want to talk about that in a minute because it reveals a lot about her. But thanks for introducing us to Clara right now. Heather, I love Jules. One thing, I am a big proponent of entrepreneur women, and Jules is all that. So take it away. Tell us about Jules.
She came back home to this little stoplight town in the middle of the mountains of Virginia. It's rural. Her parents owned a campground. Her mother's deceased. She had some time to spend with her dad to revamp these trailers, and he passed away and she inherited the campground. So she spends most of her days and nights trying to keep this business solvent, looking for ways to bring in wine tastings and crafts and book author things, just events that would attract people to town. And then there's a murder on her property, and the town goes berserk. Everything.
Okay, wait a minute. I'm going to add, it's not just a murder. The body is found with a red G-string. A middle-aged writer.
He's supposed to be a writer. And he just
you got to laugh out loud when you reach that point.
And she's horrified. There's this body and a G-string on her property.
So, has that happened to you?
No.
I was tickled by that. I thought your descriptions were very good, and I enjoyed her humor, and the way she handled it was kind of very matter-of-factly.
And she gets involved in the investigation because it's not moving fast enough, and it's her business.
That's true. Okay, so the next very kind of uncomfortable situation, James. Julian Cooper, who is your protagonist, wakes up in a lovely hotel room in San Francisco and has no idea why she's there. And it's kind of every woman's worst nightmare. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. Julian Cooper is that woman I think we all know at least one or two of. She's very driven. She's worked hard for everything she's achieved, and she's really excelled in a male-dominated environment, and is a vice president of a Fortune 500 pharmaceutical company. But to get there, I think we're going to find that she has kind of sacrificed her personal life. She doesn't have a lot of strong ties outside that workplace. But yeah, Jillian wakes up in a strange place, doesn't know how she got there, can't remember anything from the last 48 hours. There's pictures on the nightstand that start to look back at her, and it's basically her with her boss and kind of intimate situations that she can't remember ever having taken. And she starts to soon discover that there's blood on her clothes, her boss has been murdered, and she doesn't know if she's a murderer or insane. And that kind of sets Jillian on her path.
It's a great setup. Absolutely,
thank you.
A setup that I think most, and it's interesting, as I said, all three protagonists here are women, and both Lita and Heather, you've written in first person, and James, you've written in third, which I think, to be is a very comfortable place for you to be with this young female protagonist. And I really felt it felt very real on the page to me, as I read your book. I want to talk a little bit, though, which really gives us more insight. And so here I'm going to be talking to writers who are looking to how do you get characterization on the inside? How do you get inside a person's head as a writer on the page legitimately? And so frequently that's done with the use of a sidekick. Or with, and James, you can talk about it because you've done it a little bit with kind of the third person, talking about what her thought patterns and so forth. But Lita, let me start with you. Lita's sidekick is Vera, who I adore. She was she was kind of a jack of all trades, former security guard who turned legal assistant, and now she's your tailog wannabe PI. And a new character in this book who I just was tickled when you introduced Clara's mom. Do you want to talk about those characters, sidekicks, with you?
Oh, of course. The sidekicks actually play a big role in my series. And as you mentioned, this is the first time the sidekicks kind of switch because it's been the same throughout. But this time, Corey has a need for the mother to be in here because this Villa Sunset that's in Butterfly Beach in Santa Barbara has high security, or she thinks it does, and they can't get in on the inside. And they have to come up with a plan to do that. And guess what? Mom is the perfect key to get into Villa Sunset, which is what they did. And it's very important, I think, in life and on the page that our sidekicks have skills that we do not. For example, as you mentioned, Vera's got skills. She's a former security guard, so she's very well connected and she understands the security guard mind. Her mother's obviously got skills that Corey didn't know about, but she certainly learns about them quickly as the story unfolds. And also Michael's in there too. And Michael's a recurring character. He started out as Corey's best friend and then turned into a love interest. He comes into this one a little bit later too, but he's got skills because he's got culinary skills, which she doesn't have. He is a tech whiz and he's a mechanic too, because her car is always on the verge of conking out on her. So sidekicks need to be loyal, they need to be good listeners, they need to show up, and they need to do things that you can't. And that all just enhances everything she needs to do, which is to crack the crime.
And it's also very sensitive of you as the writer to allow your principal character to allow other characters to come in and take over places and reveal things about the character that I found very interesting because it made them very dimensional to me. Through conversations and through what she could do and what she knew she needed to go to get a clue where things would unfold organically, which I think is a good sign of a very well-written book. So I really applaud you on that. Let's see. So Heather, Aunt Roxanne, again, a relationship. So this your pride character, again, like Lita's character, has very good relationships, including your mom. You brought in Jules' aunt, Roxanne, and she's really kind of wild.
She is, and she's feisty, and there's no filter, so she gets to say things that Jules probably wouldn't, because Southern females don't say these things. So Aunt Roxanne does.
So how is that for you for a writer? Are you able to be a little Monday morning quarterback with her?
I think so, and it's fun to write those characters because I tend to have the personality that Jules has, so I would write things that I would say or she would say. But Roxanne lets us be somebody else, somebody totally.
She's not proper. She's going to tell you how it is, and it's fun. It's fun, and it moves it along too. So your book has there's no lag. It's boom, 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 and it's laugh out loud. It's quick, it's fun, it's fast paced, and I love Roxanne, and I like the relationship between them, the family that they're. Yeah. Okay, so James, you're on the hot seat right now. Julian doesn't really have a confidant, but because you're writing in third person, we get to hear her thoughts. So talk to me about how you did this and how you brought this out.
Yeah, I purposely didn't want her to have a steady sidekick in this because this is a story where she really is on her own and she's got to struggle through this thing that she's facing really by herself. Certain people pop up and kind of give her a nudge, the police inspector that she doesn't know is going to arrest her or feed her pancakes. But yeah, one of the things I did is I wrote a short story in first person in Jillian's voice. And it was just a scene. It never made it to the book, just a scene about her interacting with the corporate environment in a boardroom setting and the stuff she was taking from the CEO and that kind of stuff. And it kind of helped me hear her voice and kind of understand her tone and that kind of thing. So that when I got to writing it, I could really tell her story, and it made me feel a little bit closer to that personality.
You don't know this, but that really led into my next question. I really love that you did that, because I think that authors, we talk about the setup, we have our kind of what I refer to as the 3-act setup. We have act 1, where we meet the character in the world and what their world is, and we get to identify what their problem is. And then we I'm going to ask you really quickly what each one of your characters' problem is, because then we meet their problem. And this is where writers go, yeah, and what do I do? So Lydia, real quick, what is Vera's problem? What does she really want to find out here?
What's Corey's problem?
Corey's, I'm sorry, yes.
That's okay. Well, she wants to open her own PI agency, she and Vera together. And so they need to get some seed money to do that. They need to crack more cases on their own. So she takes this case because she has to find where a missing senior went. I mean, no one's noticed that this one senior is missing at this posh retirement community except for one person, the assistant director, and Corey is hired to find him because she's worried that something happened to him because of other events that took place at the villa. And
what's her stumbling block? Why can't she find him? Why can't she just go out and find him?
Well, he's left the premises, and no one's looking for him because seniors come and go. But again, things were heard that make the assistant director believe that something unsavory happened to him. And so she wants Corey to find out. Okay.
And Heather, what does Vera want, and why can't she have it?
Jules,
I'm sorry.
That's okay. She wants to keep this business at all costs. This is the last connection she has to her parents. And she's got this crotchety writer who just fusses about everything, and then he ends up dead. And her aunt, Roxanne, is one of the first suspects. So she's got a dead body on her property and guests that would be shocked. She was shocked. So she's trying to do everything that she can to figure out. And he really may not be what he says he is.
Interesting. Okay. And James, real quickly, what have we got here that Julian can't have? What does she want to find? I think we kind of know that now, but talk about a little what you want to find.
Yeah, Jillian really needs to find out, number one, if she killed her boss. She doesn't know. She's trying to convince herself that she didn't go down her mother's path of dementia and mental illness and maybe did something that she doesn't remember. And then she stumbles across her stumbling block, which is, she's been kind of set up as the front for a fake pharmaceutical operation. Mm-hmm. And they don't want her telling a story.
And it's basically said, hey, accept that you did this and you can go for a short term to prison and we'll take care of you or not. Yeah. So, oh, wait, I'm going to do this. Okay, so we've got we've got two very different types of mysteries. We've got soft boiled, we've got actually three, cozy, and I'm going to say Lita, you're soft boiled. I'm going to say Heather, you're very cozy, and Jim, you're more traditional. But we've all established at the end of the first act there's a problem, and that these characters who we're getting to know either through omniscient third person and hear your thoughts, or through their sidekicks of who they are and what they want and what they can't have, and there's a problem. So a lot of writers at this point kind of keep going madly, and they reach this midpoint and they've got the stumbling blocks, and now what do I do? So I want to talk to you a little bit about that, because what I do is when an idea first comes to me, it's like I've got this brilliant picture in my mind, and then it's like a jigsaw puzzle, and it falls off my desk in 1,000 different pieces. and I got to find the pieces and put them back together. They all belong there, but I can't find them. I find that as I start to put it together, it's like a Rubik's Cube. You've got to solve this mystery. How are you going to put it together? And one of the tricks I do is I go back. I've always written a log line to start with. This mystery is about blah, blah, blah. So everything has to apply to that. And I start to bring my characters back in and start to interview them. But that's what I've done. So I'm curious, because I can imagine that you also met stumbling blocks along the way. So what did you do? How did you solve your stumbling blocks? Lita, that's back to you.
Well, I need to be able to see my characters and hear them loud and clear, so that because my books are character driven for the most part. And they're the ones who tell me, or where they're going. So they need to be very defined for me. And I actually don't have a problem with the middle section. My biggest challenge is that first chapter, because I go back and rewrite that probably 100 times. And even with my latest book, the newest one, I went back at the last minute and put in an entirely new first chapter, because one of my beta readers, who happens to be my mother, and she was right, said that nothing happens in the first chapter. And she, so I just moved that further ahead and I wrote a whole new first chapter. So I keep going back to that first chapter because it really does set the groundwork for what's coming ahead. And somehow I always am able, I don't know, it's a miracle, but I'm able to tie in that first chapter to the ending, which is what happened this time too.
That's a very clever tie-in. And I think that's very good points, because
it was an accident, Nancy. It was an accident.
but it's I'm going to say this is your 5th book, so I don't think it was as much of an accident as its experience, because you learn as you go that you've got to really capture that reader's attention, and they have to understand in that first act, which is the first couple of chapters, what it is, who your character is, where they are, what they want, and why they can't have it, and they got to be likable. You got to make them likable. And well, that sounds very simple. Trying to put it on the page can be a real jigsaw puzzle, trying to put it all together. So Heather, talk to me, what was your first big stumbling block in this book?
I like harmony and peace, and I like everything wrapped up nicely. And that doesn't always work for a mystery. There's got to be some pain and some suffering, and then she's got to get to that precipice, and then there's another one, or there's another stumbling block after that. So that was troubling at first when I first started writing, I wanted to end every chapter happy. Everybody went to bed. It was lovely. And we'll start today, and tomorrow will be a new day. And it's like, no, there has to be that bump in the middle of the night, or that phone call, or that noise that you can't explain. There's got to be something that keeps the story moving forward.
And I think you do that very well. I think you do that very well, because you do have that kind of bump in the night, just about the fact that, okay, everything's going to be fine, and then whoops, there's not. So I enjoyed that with you, because it kept me turning pages late at night, if I can say that, but it was fine. Okay, so James, you're on. What was your biggest stumbling block here? I love the way you opened the book. It was absolutely fantastic. It was gripping.
Good. Well, thank you. I'll quit there. Thank you very much. No,
because you had a lot you had to braid together, because this is a very there's a lot of elements here. You have the market, the pharmaceutical market, the black market, right. The things that are going on. She's dealing with mental illness. I thought this was really a very thought-driven book.
Oh, good. Thank you. No, I think every book, there's somewhere in the second act where I kind of get bogged down. It's not a writer's block. It's just when that happens, I'm not looking at the scene right, and I've got to change something about it. I don't know what it is yet. And up until this book, I've been a very linear writer, which means I write, chapter 1 all the way through to the end, and you just fight your way through it. What I did this time in the book that I'm working on now is when I hit that stopping point, I'll write the end of the book. I think I know how the end of the book is going to be, so I'll write that up. And then every time that's revealed, that's what I need. I need that clue, that fact, that pattern into this chapter that I'm bogged down on. And that's kind of unlocked things for me a little bit. And it was actually fun to watch it work.
Yeah, I would think so.
And it did.
Because it's that
Yeah.
bridge sometimes. It's sometimes the
Mhm.
hardest part. You know, you get to the middle and then it's the bridge. And sometimes I end up having to go back and then kind of rework things. And it's like dominoes. Everyone has to go
Exactly.
through.
Exactly.
Rubik's Cube.
And I might end up changing that ending anyway, but it started moving the story forward again. And that's what I've been doing there.
Mhm. So let's talk about how the protagonist changed. So Lita, how did your characters change toward the end of the book? I mean, their relationships definitely changed. I think it was interesting because Mom became far more, you know, their daughter was far more impressed with what Mom knew. And that, you know, she didn't quite know all this. She was so cool.
Right. And isn't that true in real life too? I mean, we sometimes underestimate our parents and all of a sudden like, wow, they know how to do that. And that's basically what happened to her. But Corey's arc actually happens from the first book in the series, Murder and Other Unnatural Disasters, all the way to this one. Because if you see her in the beginning, she's so immature. Vera tries to become her friend and Corey won't have it. She just doesn't have any sidekicks. She wants nobody. And, you know, as the series progresses, all of a sudden, she matures. She appreciates the people around her more. You know, she has a problem with lying, and she's really trying to work on that, and hopefully that'll be behind her soon. But all of her sidekicks and the people around her, including her mom, seem to make her a better person just for being there. I mean, she's learned a lot of things from Michael because he's just brimming with integrity, of which she has none. But in this book, you know, she starts to get a bit of that herself. It's starting to rub off on her.
Are there elements of you on the page here?
No, that in my first book there were, because I had to get a few things off my chest, but for the most part, no, not anymore. I've gotten them all out of the way so I can have the characters move on their own without me. But
Although I did feel like, because I met you and your mother at previous book signings, and I thought I thought the symbiotic relationship was very
a
nice.
little bit, yeah.
They're very tender. And a matter of fact, several of your reviewers have talked about how tender you are on the page with your characters, and I thought that was nice. So Heather, tell me a little bit how your character has grown and changed in this certain first book out in her arc.
She's divorced. She wants nothing to do with dating. She doesn't really have a lot of close friends her own age. She has her aunt and her staff. But when you go home at night, she's got her dog.
Who plays a very important role? Bijou. Bijou, yes, right.
Bijou, Bijou is her sidekick. She's a Jack Russell, based on one of my Jack Russells who's snoring right now. She's down there. But through the book, she learns that she can take some chances and she can poke around, and she finds out she's very good at getting information from people. She just asks, and sometimes they just tell her. And she's got a friend that's got some dark web experience, maybe hacking, and she's able to reach out to her to find some information that she can't find otherwise.
So
I
her
think
growth is
Mhm.
informational as well as being a little bit accepting a new position in life.
Mhm.
And James, what about Jules?
I think what she learned is she learned a lot about herself, and she developed some self-reliance and some strength that she didn't know she had, just to survive this process. And I think she ends up, you know, a lot stronger than she went into this book. That's for sure.
So I don't want to give any spoilers, because I tell you all the way through you're wondering, is she imagining this? Did she do it? Is somebody else done it? What's going on? Okay, so I got another question. This is kind of a typical question, so we'll throw the hat out. So are you guys pantsers or plotters or?
Hey, Nancy. You know, living with serial killers and convicts for 30 years, I can kind of spot some darkness out there, and you know, cozy writers and there's some dark people. So I think it's time for some confessions here.
I agree.
Why don't we, and Nancy, let's include you. Let's start with you, as a matter of fact.
Oh my.
Name some of the ways you have killed off your characters.
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, you know, it's funny because I was at one of a girlfriend who I walk with every week was asking me this the other day. We were having this conversation because my first series was the Carol Childs Mysteries, and I spent 25 years in news and talk radio. And what launched them was we were carrying the O.J. Simpson trial on the air. And I walked in the studio when the on-air host was on break, and he was talking to a caller who the caller said to the host, "I won't tell the police this, but I'll tell you." And immediately, that's the spark that goes off. I go, okay, that's going to be, as soon as I retire from radio, I'm going to write a rip and read about all that goes on behind the radio stations. So my first series, I poisoned him, I stabbed him, I drowned him, I suffocated him. I did everything except a gun because I'm kind of afraid of guns, so I don't do guns. And then the second series, the Misty Dawn series, was even more. It's only a trilogy, but that's the series that deals with a Hollywood psychic to the stars who is, think of a woman who's coming to California in the 60s in her van, her painted van, selling love potions out the back. And she sets herself up as a psychic to the stars, and she's to Liz Taylor. She reads for Liz Taylor and the Gabor sisters and a former president's wife who had her on speed dial. And she never put money aside. So in her late 60s, she suddenly finds that she's house sitting and still doing readings in her very leaky painted van. One of her clients suggests she move into her brother's home, and her brother has passed, but not quite. And her brother is what we call a shade. And a shade is a person that's between two worlds. And every time somebody knocks on the door for a reading, both Wilson, the shade, and Misty go and investigate. And that includes all kinds of crazy murders. So I've done everything except a gun. So I do confess, but it's only on the page.
It's only on the page.
It's only on the page.
We won't dig any further.
No.
Lita, how about you?
Well, I do have those thoughts, Jim. I will confess to that. But they're not in the book though, because my books have more of a lighthearted nature. As Nancy mentioned, it's soft-boiled, so everything happens off the page. I don't want to see any blood. I don't want to see any violence in the book because it disturbs me, and I don't want to disturb the reader. But what I do, espespecially again in the first one, is maybe there's some revenge in there. For example, a boss who's constantly, letting my heroine in that book, always putting her down, not letting her do things, underestimating her. There might be some revenge at work there as well, or someone who is very greedy, their pocketbook could get hit very strongly. Things like that give me tremendous satisfaction. But for the most part, everything happens off the page. Although I have used poison before, Nancy, but I may not have them, done away with. They might survive.
They linger?
I can't write dark. I have to, for my own sake, I have to write light.
Well, I enjoyed it.
Heather, how about you? How have you offed your characters?
I may confirm your hypothesis. Let's see. I usually strangle, poison, stab, or shoot. Those are the majority. Those are my go-tos. But I have had an insulin injection overdose. I've had a snake bite. Someone was hit with a shock absorber. Someone was bludgeoned with a statue, strangled with Christmas lights, and crushed by a piece of furniture.
Wow. And you write cozy, Heather?
I write cozy. No, there's no blood and guts in the.
I've actually used bee venom in one too, as well.
Oh, that's good too.
Yeah, that's a good one. So these are the types of things you won't read on the jackets of books. But we're kind of getting closer on the time. I want to open this up to some questions if we have some listeners out there. But I want to ask everybody what's next, because we're writers, one warning, anybody who has a writer who is a friend and they're wondering what they're thinking about when they're talking, not the writer, but you're talking to the writer, they're planning murder. And so, when they're smiling at you, in the back of their mind, they're thinking, just like Heather, how's she going to kill somebody with a shock, or Lita with poison, but not quite, or Jim, I don't know. So tell me a little bit, Lita, what are you working on next?
Before I get to that, I forgot to admit something to Jim, and that is that my short stories, though, are not so light necessarily. I have one that's actually coming out tomorrow on Mystery Weekly, and that's not a lighthearted one. And anyway, she's an old lady who's very violent. Anyway, so what am I working on next? Number 6 in my series. It continues the misadventures of Corey Locke and her sidekicks. And this time, actually, there may or may not be a psychic involved. An older woman was found in her bed, supposedly died of natural causes, but a psychic tells the woman's family that it was not natural causes. So Corey has to investigate and figure out what actually happened, if something foul play was involved. And
That sounds interesting. You know, it's interesting to me, and I'm just going to make a brief little side note here, is that frequently authors, and Jim, you mentioned this too, when you're writing a book, you'll stop and you'll write a short story, either to work out a scene, which can work into a full short story by itself, or just because you just are taking a break between books and writers write. But but I find too, and Lita, it's interesting that you said the voice is different in the short story, and the genre is almost different in the short story. And I do the same thing, and it amazes me. I think, where did this come from? I can come very dark on short stories or very funny on short stories, and it's very different from where I am. Heather, how about you? What's next?
Let's see. I've got the 2 series that are coming out. So the 3 books for both of those series are already written. I'm working on the 4th one for the glamping series and the 4th one for my PI series right now.
There's never a dull moment in your life, girl.
No, and I'm an IT manager during the day, so my life is very compartmentalized.
So during the day, you're kind of constantly working to be real back here on the stories?
A little bit. And every once in a while, the guys will say something about a cyber crime or a hacking, and it's like, wonder what I could do with that.
Jim, how about yourself?
Yeah, I've got a new series coming out in July. And like I mentioned, it's going back to the police procedural. It's called Dead Drop, is the first book. Let's see if I got the cover.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Oh, yeah. And it's set in the Arizona desert. And the detective is stumbling across. Now I'm doing cozy stuff. I'm stumbling across a dead body. He's investigating a series of migrant deaths in the Arizona desert, and got a kind of a hardline immigration approach because his partner was killed by a coyote during an immigration run. So he's following the trail in this case, and it actually lures him over the border, and he gets trapped in a strange land in a strange place, and he now needs to rely on the very people he chased across the border to get him back to safety.
Oh, I like that premise. I'm very fond of the desert because I grew up in the desert. I grew up in Arizona, so I have a soft spot in my heart. So it looks like we've had a couple of questions that have come in. So I'm going to take some. This is from Paul, and he says, writing a book seems so daunting, but the reward is so great, I'm sure. So how do you keep going, keep writing more books? So I'll throw that out here for anyone who wants to answer.
I don't like how I feel when I'm not writing. So that's what makes me keep going back. But it's getting started is such a challenge because I'm a major foot dragger, and it takes me a while to get going. But with the first book in this series, I don't know if the rest of you felt this way too. In the first book that you wrote, the first novel, I thought about it for years before I did it because it was so daunting. I wasn't sure if I could do it. I didn't know how to start, but it's just once you can get started and just get those words down, they don't have to be great. I think that will help you reach the end. I mean, it's really that simple.
I like that answer. I think that's very true because and I like the fact that you thought you're worried about if you're not writing, because I've often felt that way too. I can't not write because once you've done a book, you're afraid not, or I am anyway, afraid not to continue on for fear that this craft will leave me, because I feel like writing is like any skill set. If you want to be a piano player, you play the piano. You don't get anywhere without playing. You can't just sit down cold and play. You've got to practice every day, whether it be long format or short format. Anyone else want to comment on that?
I'll second what Lita said. I feel better mentally and physically when I'm writing. I started writing after I retired from the prison system, and it was kind of a therapeutic thing to kind of get some of that trauma that I accumulated over those, almost 30 years. And it was very therapeutic. And it's kind of helped me stay a little bit more balanced, and I can compartmentalize that stuff over there into the writing, and I can just take my corgis and do therapy work at a reading program, and it's a nice place to be.
I think writing is, and Paul, I'm going to say, I think writing is a little bit like peeling an onion back, because whether you think the story, and that's why I've asked each of these writers if there's some of them and their characters there is some of us on the page emotionally, because you can't write a scene about an emotion without recalling sometime that you had a similar emotion in your head, whether it was empathy or shock or fear or laughter. For me anyway, if I can recall that feeling, it's easier for me to transport it to the character on the page. And I think when I read back at my notes, I thought, well, that really kind of came alive. It really felt much more real. Misty Berry, I love this name, Misty, because I have Misty Dawn in my second series there. You address a question for James, and says, James, your story sounds like a great noir setup. How did you decide to end Black Label? Oh, I don't know if you want to do a spoiler here, James. So,
hi, Misty. I think I can say without giving too much away, I wanted to see Jillian grow and become resilient and find a strength that she didn't know she had. I know we said that earlier, but I think that was one of the big things I wanted Jillian to discover more about herself and realize that, and this is, I think, where I wrote some of myself into Jillian's character, is she was so work focused and career focused that she forgot, a whole other part of her life. And I think what she experienced in the story in Black Label kind of opens up the rest of her life so she can be a little bit more balanced in how she approaches the world.
I thought that was very real about your character too, because having been a professional woman and having had a long career, there's no way to have it all. You have a little now and you have a little bit, but you toggle back and forth. And they don't get to the end of retirement and not look back and say, oh, I wish I had maybe done a little more of this and a little less of this, or maybe I could put off that promotion or that opportunity and done this. And no matter which way you took, there's a sacrifice. And usually it's always in relationships. It just is. And I thought you did a very nice job in showing that on the page.
Good. Thank you.
Terry, let's see. This one's from Terry. On this writer's panel, we have a journalist, a lawyer, a prison official, and a cop's kid. It seems like you're all predisposed to write about murder. Do those experiences choose the genre for you? Oh, good question, Terry. You want to take that, Jim?
I think in my case, maybe it did. When you see a lot of that, and it's hard to explain that life to the general public. There's so much that goes on inside of a prison that, it's barbaric, it's dark, it's just a nasty place to be. When I started at Folsom in the 1980s, there wasn't a day that went by that we didn't shoot somebody on the yard. And that kind of soaks in after a while. So I think when I went to go write some of that accumulated trauma, like we just talked about, I think that's how it came out. But I've always been a police procedural reader. I love thrillers. I like that kind of cop story. So I think it was a natural place for me to go.
I can imagine. So having come from a newsroom, because from college on, I spent time in a newsroom on both sides of the desk, and I worked early on as a journalist and then on the sales side, and then eventually ended up managing a sports radio station, which is proof God has a sense of humor because I am not a sports babe. But I did manage a sports radio station for 2 years in LA as the only female general manager of a radio station, period. So it was very interesting. But you do pull from your background, no matter where you are. And those stories showed up. They affect you, but I think they ring true. What doesn't kill you makes you a better writer. You're going to write about. It's good. How about Lita?
I was going to say, working in the entertainment industry, I was only there for 5 years, but it seemed like 15 years. And some of those people were so bad. They mistreated everyone. I would pick up the phone. There's actually a scene in my first book where Corey picks up the phone and someone just starts F-bombing her for minutes. I don't know how long it was, but that happened to me. And I was 26. It took me by surprise because I didn't know the person. I'd never had any interaction, and all of a sudden, boom. And so I had Corey handled in a much better way than I did. But, that kind of stuff makes you want to kill people. And so entertainment industry seemed like a perfect place to start. And I hadn't read about any lawyer books set in Hollywood yet. I hadn't. Maybe they're out there. And so I thought it would be fun to turn Hollywood on its head and put this female in there who's not going to take anything from anyone. She's fearless. She doesn't care about very much. She loves taking risks. So let her handle it. Let her do what I couldn't do when I was there. And then I took it from there, and it was a lot of fun.
Well, it's always great to be able to play Monday morning quarterback because you can get much better at it. And Heather, how about yourself?
I'm the cops kid. Way before true crime, I thought everybody talked about murder and mayhem and stupid criminals at the dinner table. And it wasn't really until I got to college that I found out they didn't. Not everybody talks about murder and the coolest way to kill somebody or how to get away with something. I mean, I was probably 6 years old melting down crayons with my dad to make bullets for his SWAT team. I mean, what kid at 5, 6 can make bullets? I can't tell you how many times we went out and he got paged and we had to leave. We grew up in the beach area, so we never evacuated because he was always on duty. So he was on the force for 46 years, and he's still my best resource. He's retired now, but there's just some things you don't want to Google. So it's, hey, Dad, what does a meth lab smell like? Hey, how long will a body stay submerged? What gun should I use to get a hole about this big? He's great.
I may call you. Okay, so we have one final question that's going to take us to the top of the hour, which has been a wonderful evening, guys. I want to thank you. But it's from an anonymous attendee. I think that's interesting. And they say, what writers do you enjoy reading? So Lita, I'll throw that to you first.
Oh, I read a lot. I haven't had time in recent years to read as much as I'd like, but I love lighthearted mysteries. I love the Stephanie Plum series. I've read most of them, I think, through maybe 15 or 16 or 17. But I love getting sucked into her adventure and just having a lot of fun along with Stephanie. I also like the Number One Ladies Detective Agency series because it's very peaceful and very relaxing, and everybody's so kind to each other and they treat each other with great respect. So I like books that make me feel good is what I'm saying.
Okay, James. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. So go ahead, James, and I'll get to you, Heather. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I read a lot, and it's across a number of different genres, but I really enjoy lately Jennifer Hillier, Rachel Housel Hall. They write incredible stuff. Karen Slaughter is a big favorite. But I'll read everything. I'll read cozies. I'll read YA paranormal. A story's a story. And, genre labels sometimes get in the way of that, but there's a lot of good work out there.
And Heather?
I bounce around. I mean, I love cozies. Jenna Devanovich is hysterical, so I love any that are funny. Ellen Byram, Libby Klein, Sherry Harris. But then I like darker too. I mean, so I do read suspense, and I do read romantic suspense and thrillers.
I bounce around too. I'm a friend with Wendell Thomas and Ellen Byron, and they're both really great. And I just laugh at their stuff, and I admire them both. They're just wonderful authors. Daryl
Barber.
Yes, one of my favorite authors. But then also on the darker side, John Forsythe, Michael Connelly, Daniel Da Silva. And I've done a lot of research lately because my newest work, which comes out in June, called The Navigator's Daughter, is really much more of a traditional mystery. And so going back and forth. But James, you made a good point, is a story is a story. And it's whether the violence happens off the page or on the page, and it's noir, and it's kind of a dark way of presenting it. It's how the author does it. And boy, there's sometimes you just read things and you just eat them up. They're just really fantastic. So. Yep. Well, guys, I don't know. Is Michael going to come back? And there he is. Thank you so much.
What a wonderful talk, the four of you. Nancy, Heather, James, and of course, Lita. Thank you very much for just putting together a lively discussion. And everyone else, please go out, look them up, and buy their books. So thank you, everyone, and good night.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. Take care.
Thank you, Michael.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Nancy.
Bye-bye. Thank you, guys.